Only in America.
Only in America.
Only in America.
Only in America.
Only America.
Only in America.
This week on Only in America, let's call it the Summer Beach Bookworm Special, where we take a look back at 3 authors I've spoken with over the course of the year. If you read these books while at the beach, you get extra points. First person we're going to be talking to is a Boston University dean who studies public health in marginalized communities.
One of the mistakes that we keep making is we keep equating health with healthcare. Health is not healthcare. Healthcare and medicine are what you get if you're sick. Well, health is what keeps you from getting sick.
An author who learned that fear is the biggest obstacle to understanding diverse communities.
If you're just getting your information from the news, if you're just, having conversations in a bubble, that fear can continue to drive up. And if we want to really move beyond fear and move beyond this, hey, we're so divided, and move into an action, a reconciled place, then we're going to have to make a lot of intentional steps to be able to build bridges.
And a Mexican-American news anchor who's happy to criticize both of his countries.
I feel very independent. I feel that I can and that I should criticize both countries. As a matter of fact, you criticize the people and the countries that you love. And that's how I see my job.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Noorani with Only in America. Today, I'm going to admit something that few people know. For a long time, while every single one of my friends was gushing over the Broadway play Hamilton, I was dead set anti-Hamilton. Friendships were tested, tears were shed. Words were said that I just cannot repeat. It was a dark time. Then a dear friend surprised me with tickets to see the play, and I was converted. Why I was converted is a topic for another episode. But one of the many things I learned about in Hamilton was the role of Marquis de Lafayette during the Revolutionary War. In many ways, Lafayette was the first of an untold number of immigrants to play a heroic role as a member of our nation's armed services. So, why am I telling you this? Because, the Trump administration is telling immigrants who serve our nation that their undocumented immigrant family members may very well be deported. The family of Alejandra Juarez, who has been married for 18 years to Sergeant Timo Juarez, a Marine veteran, was broken up last week when she was deported back to Mexico. She didn't have a criminal record. Heck, Sergeant Juarez even voted for Donald Trump in 2016. But as he told the Military Times last week, I'm eating my words. Before she got on the plane to Mexico, leaving her husband and 2 daughters, ages 16 and 8, Alejandra spoke to NBC News.
And now they deported me, they kicking me out, and they breaking my family apart. Before you enlist in the military, think it twice. Before you marry an immigrant, think it twice. Think it if it's really worth for you to sell this country. Because look how they treated me.
Vietnam veteran Jim Jones, who served as Idaho's Attorney General and was even a Chief Justice of the Idaho Supreme Court, wrote in the USA Today last week, as any active duty service member or veteran who has been deployed overseas for combat duty can attest, you cannot give 100% in service to your country without the steadfast support of your family back home. Justice Jones went on to write, by forcibly separating this family, we are telling military members, veterans, and their families, thank you for your service, but our antiquated immigration laws matter more. And we might well kick your loved one out of the country.
I love this country. This country has given me great things because we have worked hard. But the America that we are living now is getting full of hate. If you speak English with an accent, then you're an immigrant, and then you're not a good person. It's heartbroken to see the America that this has become.
As more than 500 migrant children remain separated from their parents in various camps around the country, the Trump administration called on the ACLU to reunite them. The Justice Department argued in a federal court filing that the nonprofit group can use its, quote, considerable resources to help the process of finding these parents who have been deported by the administration and, the administration can't find. To which Judge Sabra, who is presiding over the case in San Diego, replied, The reality is that for every parent who is not located, there will be a permanently orphaned child, and that is 100% the responsibility of the administration. Finally, in this highly polarized America, it's always heartening to learn of a story where people holding different points of view still manage to be friends. So meet next-door neighbors Carlos Garcia and Ben Wilson, who were introduced to the country by NPR's Ari Shapiro. Carlos is an immigration attorney, while Ben is a Border Patrol agent. Suffice it to say, their day jobs put them on opposite sides of the immigration debate, and their wives, Elizabeth and Jackie, are also ideological opposites. But these two families know that they share a set of values that transcend politics or policy. It is these shared values that are the key to the mutual respect that solidifies their friendship.
I would say it's more complicated than just conservative or liberal. I mean, I think we have a set of values, and I think so long as we follow that, it's easy to get along with someone who works in a field that, for instance, others would consider that is on the opposite side of me.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you keep an open mind and you're not so locked in. Yeah, locked in that we have to be enemies because he's trying to save the people that we arrest. I mean,
we teach our children every day about respect, and I think that if we can emulate that in our lives, then certainly everyone else can. That's the lesson that we're teaching our children.
A little bit of respect goes a long way. I'm Ali Noorani. First up is Dr. Sandro Galea, Dean of the School of Public Health at Boston University. He's the author of Healthier, which takes a look at the foundations of population health. Sandro is an immigrant twice over. He was born and raised on the island nation of Malta and later immigrated to Canada at age 14 before eventually getting to the U.S. Under his leadership, Boston University School of Public Health is now at the forefront of public health research and the public debate around a range of important public health issues. Sandro told me through the story of an old jazz musician about the forces that drive health.
We as a society misunderstand what produces health. And if I might just tell a story, which I found captures what produces health better. And the story goes like this, very quick. It's a story of a bluesman, Blind Willie Johnson, who, for those who know the blues, will recognize Blind Willie Johnson. Some of his songs have lived on. He was born in Texas at the turn of the 20th century. The story was that he was blinded when he was 7, when his stepmother threw lye in his eyes. So it was a domestic violence incident. And he grew up poor. He made his living busking. That's how we come to remember him, but not a very good living, as you might expect. He was married, lived in a house. His house burned down. And him and his wife didn't have any money, so they kept living in the burned down house. Early 40s, he got malaria. His wife took him to hospital. And he was turned away from hospital. And it's not clear whether he was turned away because he was blind, because he was black, or because he was poor. And then he died. Now, the question is, what killed Blind Willie Johnson? Obviously what killed him was his malaria. He died of malaria, physiologically died of malaria. But I think everybody knows that if his malaria didn't kill him, something else was going to get him any day, right? Because it wasn't just malaria that killed Blind Willie Johnson. It was poverty, it was homelessness, it was racism, it was lack of access to care, it was domestic violence. So the reason I tell the story is because those are the factors that ultimately determine health. Yes, it's malaria, but it's also poverty, it's homelessness, it's racism, it's access to care, and it's domestic violence. And we, if we care about building health, we need to care about all these factors. So now I'm telling you a story because I'm going back to your question. I said, why am I mentioning culture? Why am I mentioning culture? Because culture drives health. Because culture ultimately is the driver of health together with economic factors, together with social factors, together with our housing, together with our transportation. And that's what the book Healthier that I wrote is about. The book Healthier is about these other forces that drive health. One of the mistakes that we keep making is we keep equating health with healthcare. Mm-hmm. Health is not healthcare. Healthcare and medicine are what you get if you're sick. Well, health is what keeps you from getting sick. And I think we both agree that we would rather be healthy and not be sick than be sick and need medicine, right? At the end of the day, our goal is to die healthy. And culture, what we think, what we believe, is an important part of that. So that's why I take these issues that are going on around DACA and many of the other challenging issues I think we're facing around immigration right now as being parts of our cultural embrace of what immigration is about, what the role of immigrants is in our society, whether we actually want a cruel or a compassionate society, because those are the forces that ultimately are going to create health.
You know, I look at culture as the way that Americans who've been here for generations see the country is changing, and they wonder if their culture is changing. And are you saying that within that, the American culture, there's not a belief in being healthy as much as there's a belief in health care?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I would challenge anybody to, when you're in a conference call, it's boring, just go on Amazon. And
I've never had a boring conference call.
No, I didn't think you would. Well, in your line of work these days, nothing's boring. But look at and just look up books on health, and what you see is they're not really books about health. They're books about medicine. Mm-hmm. They're books about medicine and about making you better once you're already sick. Mm-hmm. So in this country, we keep equating health with health care. When you look at poll after poll, Americans care about health more than anything else. But the polls typically don't ask them about health. They actually ask them about health care.
Access to care.
Access to care. Now, we know from data that access to care matters for our health, but not that much. Access to care probably contributes about 5 to 10% of what our health is about. Mm-hmm. Of course, we spend 90% of our money on it. So our mistake, there's a mismatch. There's a mismatch between how much we care about health and what we spend our money on. We spend our money wrong. If I may use another analogy, I'll use a soccer team analogy. You have a soccer team, you have 11 people on a team. You're trying to get the ball onto the other net. And there's one goalie. There's one goalie, and the goalie, she can use her hands, right? The other 10 players can't use their hands. Now, people don't play soccer think that the way to win at soccer is by having the best possible goalie. But anybody who's played soccer knows it's a very big net. No goalie, no matter how good she is going to save the ball. And a good goalie spends all her time in the game yelling at the other players to keep the ball away from her. Now, why am I using that metaphor? Well, the goalie is medicine. The goalie is medicine. You want a good goalie because when you're sick, if I have pneumonia, I would like a good doctor to look after me. But what I actually want is the other 10 players. I want my housing, my transportation, taxation, my wage equity, my gender equity, all those other factors to be good to keep me from getting sick. And I think that's what actually you want as well. I think that's what we all want. I have yet to meet somebody who would rather get cured when they're already sick versus just staying healthy to begin with. All of us, we all would like to stay healthy to begin with, but we do not invest in those approaches that will do so. Immigration is one of those examples. How we treat our immigrants and how we think about the role of immigration, how we think about the role of building a diverse, welcoming society are pillars. These are cultural pillars that create a better and healthier society. And unless we invest in those, we are all going to be less healthy. And I think part of the dialogue has to be to remove the label of other from the immigrant. That's part of the conversation. That we need to understand that the well-being of immigrants among us, the well-being of the other among us, affects the well-being of all of us. And that's a hard argument to make. It's a misunderstanding, and we need to do a better job of educating people around that. We need a better job of saying, if my child doesn't get vaccinated, your child's risk of getting measles is higher. If people around you are eating too much and they're obese, your risk of getting obese is higher as well. If people around you are irresponsible in drinking and driving, your children's chances of getting run over when they're playing in the playground is higher. I'm using these examples because they illustrate how your health is much more out of your control than you think it is. Right? The myth is As long as I have enough money, as long as I'm careful enough, as long as I work out and put on my seatbelt, I'm going to be fine. And the answer is it's not true.
Right.
That's not true. Your health depends on my health, and my health depends on your health. And once we understand that, hopefully, if not for any moral reason, but perhaps for pragmatic reasons, we can start to say, well, we actually better make sure that we're all healthy. And that's how we build a healthier world.
Dr. Sandro Galea is the Dean of the Boston University School of Public Health. There's more about Sandro at our website, immigrationforum.org, where you can subscribe to the podcast and you can write a review on iTunes. What happens when a successful white middle-class woman moves with her husband and 3 children into an immigrant community in Denver, Colorado? Michelle Warren documents the experience in her new book, The Power of Proximity. Michelle works across the country as a director with the Christian Community Development Association, and she also works with us here at the National Immigration Forum. In our conversation, I learned what is behind Michelle's expertise and strategic vision for engaging communities. It is a combination of her faith, her brilliance, and her compassion. To start our conversation, I asked Michelle how her move challenged her faith and how it affected her family.
I come from a very white privileged background. Actually, my neighbors were Broncos players, so professional football, so that gives you an idea, of my socioeconomic level. And so, there's just I knew that my kids would not have the same opportunities, but I wasn't going to say they had less opportunities, right? Mm-hmm. That when my husband and I graduated from school and met and got married, we were sort of those most likely to succeed types, but we felt like we really knew so little about the world. We knew how to succeed in our little silo. And so, I think that our children just have a very different life. And so it was different, but it certainly wasn't less than.
Wasn't less than the lives that they would have had somewhere else.
Yeah, right? I mean, it was challenging. It was different. I mean, for them, they were dominant cultural minorities. They were often the only white children on the flag football team, on the bus, etc. They all spoke. We were in a predominantly Spanish-speaking community, and so they all learned how to speak Spanish in a formal way. And I think we really assimilated into that community. But yeah, there was definitely some choices that we made that made their childhood look different, but it was a really beautiful, very diverse mosaic. We're not going to really engage the problems of the world, whether it's the faith community or otherwise, if we don't have relationships. And I think we need to, in the rural context and in the suburbs, really help people to build bridges. If you're just getting your information from the news, if you're just, having conversations in a bubble, that fear can continue to drive up. And if we want to really move beyond fear and move beyond this, hey, we're so divided, and move into an action, a reconciled place, then we're going to have to make a lot of intentional steps to be able to build bridges. Those things don't just naturally happen. We see that with humanity, right?
So what are those steps?
Yeah, I think
now, what are the steps and what are the institutions?
Well, there's lots of institutions. I'll take a little segue that I've learned some things this last couple of years. So working with or alongside the Forum and other organizations that do work around immigration specifically, often you'll talk to adults, like they're maybe in their 40s, and they'll say, I used to play on a basketball team that was much more diverse. I don't know what happened, or I went to school. And so I think the institution of school, even in an environment that maybe isn't 50-50 something, people of color or 50 white, but there was a smattering of different diversity, even in a rural or suburban context. People will talk about their relationships with people that were different than they are, and they're like, well, I don't know what happened. Well, they went to college, and if you go to a private liberal arts college, or you have different opportunities, if you have a socioeconomic status that puts you in one, vein of college versus a community college, a lot of your formation happens during that time, and you end up in careers that are a little less diverse. Mm-hmm. And so that's something I've kind of learned as well, that our path, our higher education choices sort of undoes some of the socialization and the diversity, that of that institution of public school, and so that's one institution that I think we see some goodness, and then we see it sort of undone, as a result of secondary education and master's level. I think, for me, the church, obviously I work for a Christian organization, and it's not, it's a church-based philosophy that's sort of the social network in low-income communities where CCDA is located. We have a lot of diversity, because the economics is low, and you're just going to see more diversity, in that particular context. But, I didn't come from that kind of community. I chose to move to that type of community and live with that mindset and philosophy. But I come from a very white background and that institution. So it's not just the church, but a lot of the nonprofits or higher education that is, a result of church, foundation of church rather. Those are institutions that are definitely siloed, not just racially, but socioeconomically. And then, business and the opportunity to succeed, it's often in who you know. And internships that you get, and just connections. And sometimes it's not even just people that you know, but people that you're able to watch and feeling very confident because your neighbor has a certain track record. But if you're the only one who's ever done these things, it's really hard to move past that, even if your parents have high hopes and dreams for you, and even if you have high hopes and dreams for yourself. So I think just some of the institutions, not just around higher education, but business and, like I said, internships and opportunities to move your life forward. Even if you had perfect status, we'd have some barriers. But we definitely, that's just a few of the things that have come to mind.
So I think I heard actually just yesterday that you put together an event in kind of rural Idaho.
Last week I did.
Yeah. So tell me a little about this. So I heard about this as, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Driggs, Idaho has about 1,400 people. And I met a pastor at a conference that I did a 9-hour immigration seminar with in a room that had no air conditioning in July. So it was for the very strong of mind and committed. But yeah, he came up to me and said, do you think you'd ever come to Driggs, Idaho? And I was like, sure, why not? I like meeting people, and I think these are places that you're often not invited. And it's not a place that conversations like this are happening. And so why would we miss an opportunity, to have this conversation? And so I said yes, and we planned it. It was actually last week. So I flew in on a Tuesday, and I was there, did a number of events on Wednesday, and then flew out Thursday. But the thing about the event, the main community event on Wednesday night, is, like I said, there were 1,400 people in the town, and there were just under 200 people that showed up.
It's amazing.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
And I think the pastor was worried. He was worried that nobody would come because it was a hard conversation, right?
Yeah.
And he was worried that maybe I wouldn't want to be there. But it was the most beautiful expression of creating. It's almost like pushing against those institutions and creating space to air in a conversation that people were wanting to have.
Yep.
I asked the group, I said, does anybody have a psychology degree? Thankfully, no one raised their hand, so they couldn't, push back on what I was about to share. But I've said this there, I've said it in many places. When you're limited by 140 characters or less or different sound bites, you really don't get a true picture of the conversation of immigration. All you do is get fear, which is the amygdala is in that back of the brain, that fight and flight. It's just going to gear up no matter what. That's a natural thing. It's a good thing, actually, because if we're in danger, we need to be afraid. But the amygdala moves through the frontal lobe, or that executive function in the front.
This is a different podcast now. Brain anatomy. But.
Okay. Well, listen, I'm not a psychologist, so your listeners can totally get me. Although I've tried it a few times and it works. But that frontal lobe, if you don't have good information, you aren't able to calm down. I'm kind of in the business of informing the frontal lobe so that when you hear things on the news, you have something to check it with, so that you would be not content with quick and angry answers that are driven by fear, but that you'll calm down and say, there's probably more to the story. I don't want to vilify people on the left or on the right, but I do want to be a steward of good information. I want to challenge people to get good information. So I just basically told them that I'm in frontal lobe work, and so that's what we did. And you know what? What was beautiful is when you go to a place like Driggs, and it's no different than any other place I've really been having these conversations, is there's some people who are skeptical. They're worried that I'm going to turn them into something they don't want to be, or try to push them to be something. But that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate people so people can think. And I think we have undersold ourselves and our brain and our thinking, and have not given the American people good information. And what I saw there was fear dies down when you know more. You can control the fear, and a lot of good things. I'll just tell you the outcome of it is the priest from the Catholic Church was there, the Presbyterian pastor was there, and they both stood up and said, we as faith leaders are committed to doing this, and then made a joke, we're going to undo 500 years of the Reformation by working together as a Protestant and Catholic, and they are planning a big kickball game together to start to overcome fear. Because it isn't just about statistics and a wall. It's about not knowing each other and not trusting one another. And so since nobody's really good at kickball, they decided they would do that. So that's their new plan. So I told them, I said, I want to be back here. I don't want to be back, actually. I think I've been there. I'll just take an email or a text. That 10% grade was not my favorite, or the putter playing. But I said to them, I was just like, I want to hear where you are in a year. This is a long work. This isn't just about one bill. This is about changing culture and changing the way we see each other. And if it's kickball or salsa or whatever, I want to see the good work you're doing as you learn to be a good neighbor.
So just, what's the message that, a reader of Power of Proximity, what's the message you want them to leave with?
We in 2017 are ever aware of problems and injustice. And we are left with a question of what we're going to do with it. Sometimes we think there's nothing we can do and we shut down or we're afraid to explore. And my call is, don't be afraid. Find people, meet people, and move this awareness and this fear, this skepticism to an action that can help us drive that beloved community, that reconciled community forward. That's where we really want to be. We all say we want to pursue the common good, but it's going to take intentional steps. This stuff doesn't happen naturally, and there's enough in society that's pushing back. So yeah, move beyond awareness. Get to some action. Don't quit your day job. Just join each other and try to get to know one another and care about each other's well-being.
Well, thank you very much for joining me. So Michelle Warren, Director of Advocacy for the Christian Community Development Association and author of Power of Proximity, Moving Beyond Awareness to Action. Thank you.
Thank you.
In a moment, my conversation with Jorge Ramos of Univision.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the James Irvine Foundation, expanding opportunity for the people of California, and from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, established in 1911 by Andrew Carnegie to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding.
Okay, who is next? Yeah, please. Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Go ahead. No, you don't. You haven't been called. Go back to Univision. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sit down, please. You weren't called. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, that's Jorge Ramos of Univision. He's being escorted out of the room. He was asking a question, and Donald Trump said he didn't call on him. That's why he is being removed. Jorge Ramos refused to back down.
That was Univision anchor and journalist Jorge Ramos being thrown out of a Donald Trump press conference in August of 2015. An Emmy Award-winning veteran of the news, Jorge has covered the fall of the Berlin Wall, the Gulf War, and the terrorist attacks of 9/11. He has written several books, and he discussed with me his latest work, Stranger, the challenge of a Latino immigrant in the Trump era. These days, you can find Jorge delivering the news every night on Univision, chatting with Anderson Cooper on CNN, or sparring with Tucker Carlson on Fox News. In each case, Jorge delivers the facts and represents the American dream immigrants pursue every single day.
It is clearly unfortunate that I've been living 35 years in this country and that sometimes I still feel like a stranger. Recently, a couple of conservative websites started printing a story, all fake, that I was planning to go back to Mexico. I don't know how they got that. I think it started with a show that I did in Spanish with Jaime Bailey, which is a very well-known journalist in Miami. And they took out of context part of the conversation. And now they were reporting that I was going back to Mexico. Well, in social media, it's been crazy because I've been getting all these offers of people willing to pay my flight, my ticket to go back to Mexico. GoFund accounts, all these people who don't want me in this country. And this is my country.
Jorge has covered 3 decades of international news, from the fall of the Berlin Wall to the war in Afghanistan. He's won 8 Emmys and been featured on Time magazine's list of the world's most influential people. But my favorite Jorge Ramos memory is the first time we went to lunch in Miami 5 or 6 years ago. It was a little restaurant a mile or 2 from his office. Certainly one of the most famous people to walk in the door, Jorge greeted everyone with a genuine humility and a sincere smile. He's just good people. We began our conversation with his new book, called Stranger, The Challenge of a Latino Immigrant in the Trump Era. How did you end up writing a book about, your identity as an American who was born in Mexico, as opposed to, this very contentious back and forth with Trump?
Everything started when Donald Trump said that Mexican immigrants were criminals, drug traffickers, and rapists. I'm a Mexican immigrant, and everything started from that point. I never felt like a stranger in this country, and this country embraced me in beautiful ways. This country has been very generous with me. When I really needed the support of the United States in 1983, when I left Mexico, Los Angeles and UCLA and the US embraced me and told me, hey, Jorge, come here. We can help you. So what I've been trying to do since then is that to make sure that the immigrants who came after me get the same generous treatment that I got. But I cannot hide the fact, and I don't want to, and I cannot escape from the fact that I was born in Mexico. And many people might want a simple definition of my identity. I'm an American or I'm Mexican, one or the other. But the truth is, Ali, that I'm both. Sandra Cisneros, the wonderful writer, told me that I am an amphibian. And I think I am. I'm Mexican and I'm American. I'm Mexican-American. Sometimes I'm Chilango, which is the way they call people from Mexico City. Sometimes I'm Chicano. California embraced me when I first came to this country. And sometimes I decide, I have two passports, by the way, a Mexican passport and a US passport, a green one and a blue one. And I vote in both countries. I'm linked to both countries. And as I write in the book, sometimes I decide to be Mexican or American, depending on how long is the line at the Mexico City airport. I wish I could tell you that I have just one identity. The truth is that I am many things at the same time. And I'm comfortable with being many people and many things at the same time.
You said that you feel that some people don't think you're American enough, and then others don't feel you're Mexican enough. Does this help you maintain your lack of neutrality, as you wrote? The way you made the case that a good journalist is a journalist who questions power, and to question power, you can't be neutral. By operating between both worlds, does that make it easier?
What's easier is that I'm very independent, and I criticize the Mexican government, and believe me, President Peña Nieto doesn't like me, and he hasn't given me interviews since he came to power. And obviously, Donald Trump doesn't like me either. He's not my friend, and he'll never be. And I constantly criticize him. So I feel very independent. I feel that I can and that I should criticize both countries. As a matter of fact, you criticize the people and the countries that you love. And that's how I see my job. I understand that people resent the fact that I criticize the U.S. and the anti-immigrant policy of President Trump. But this is the country where I live. This is the country that I love. And I think it is my responsibility to do that, not to be neutral.
So since 1984, do you think that there has ever been a common sense of what it means to be an American?
The moment that we're living right now with Donald Trump, Ali, is not normal. I think Trump's presidency has distorted the idea of what the United States is and should be. I believe in a United States that is tolerant, inclusive, multi-ethnic, multiracial, multicultural, that is open to immigrants like me, and that will continue being like this. Not only that, I think we have the numbers on our side. In 2044, everyone is going to be a minority. Latinos, non-Hispanic whites, African Americans, Asians, Native Americans, everyone is going to be a minority. So this country is becoming more and more diverse, not less. And that's the America that I know. If I were to bet which idea of America will prevail in the future, this idea of a multicultural, inclusive society, or the anti-immigrant idea of the United States that Trump has been promoting, that attacks immigrants, that is being racist, as his comments on Mexicans and Muslims and people from Haiti and African nations, I would bet to you that in 20 years from now, the idea of an inclusive America that helps and promotes immigration will prevail. And then when Trump says that DACA is dead, well, he killed it. He's the one who killed it. When I say that he's the most anti-immigrant president, it's not because he ejected me from a press conference, but it is because of his statements about Mexican immigrants. It is because he wants to cut legal immigration in half. It is because he has arrested 30% more immigrants than Barack Obama in his last year, because he has deported thousands and thousands of people with no criminal record, because he has created a hostile and dangerous country for immigrants like me.
So you mentioned the word no, and one of the parts of the book is the letter to your children, and that paragraph where you lay out all the important reasons is say no. I thought that was perhaps one of the most powerful part of the book. It was beautifully done.
Late in my life, I discovered the importance of disobeying pacifically, not violently. I think to do it in a peaceful way is important. I think I have to disobey when a president makes racist statements. I cannot agree with that. I think I have to disobey when I see many politicians moving around President Trump and somehow normalizing his behavior and his comments. I think I have to disobey when I see that ICE agents decide to arrest a mother or a father in front of their kids. What kind of country is that? Do we want to live in a country like that? And I say, no, I don't want to live in a country like that. And because I don't want to live in a country like that, it doesn't mean that I want to go back to Mexico. No, it means that I want to change what's wrong in this country. It means that I won't take it. It means that I'll denounce it. It means that I'll say no, that we can do much better with 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country than what we've been doing in the last few years.
Jorge Ramos is the anchor for Univision's news program Noticiero. There's more information about Jorge and our other guests at our website, immigrationforum.org, where you can subscribe to our podcast and you can write a review on iTunes. That's our show for this week. I hope you enjoyed the range of conversations. A big thank you to our producers, Regina Medina and Emily Chow, and our executive producer, Kathleen Farrell. And a big thank you and happy summer to the whole team at the National Immigration Forum. I'm Ali Nirani with Only in America. Talk to you next time.